You believe they don't fear losing you. They move through your days with the quiet arrogance of one who assumes the sun will always rise for them. But the psyche is wiser than the ego, and the unconscious always collects its debt. This person does not tremble at the thought of your absence until the mirror of their own soul begins to crack. That is when everything changes. The unconscious often masks dependency as indifference until the familiar bond faces disruption. Deep within the psyche, what appears on the surface as cool detachment or casual confidence is frequently a sophisticated defense constructed by the ego to hide a profound underlying reliance. The individual has unconsciously fused a portion of their own vitality with the presence of the other. Yet the conscious mind remains unaware of this merger. The persona maintains the narrative of self-sufficiency. They do not need, they do not cling. They simply allow the relationship to exist without apparent investment. This indifference serves as a protective veil, shielding the ego from the anxiety that would arise if the true extent of the emotional and psychic investment were acknowledged. In Jungian terms, the other has become a carrier of projected contents, unintegrated aspects of the shadow, or the anima animus that the person is not yet ready to confront within themselves. As long as the bond remains stable and predictable, the unconscious permits this comfortable illusion to persist. The dependency stays latent, disguised even from the person experiencing it. Energy flows quietly, sustaining a sense of wholeness without demanding conscious effort or vulnerability. However, when disruption enters the field, when the familiar bond begins to shift through separation, growth, or withdrawal, the compensatory mechanism of the unconscious activates with sudden force. The previously hidden dependency surges into awareness, often manifesting as intense anxiety, possessiveness, or a desperate grasping that surprises even the individual. The mask of indifference cracks because the psyche can no longer sustain the projection. The energy that was outsourced must now return home. This moment of disruption thus becomes a potential turning point, forcing the confrontation with inner realities that the comfortable routine had long postponed. Persona vs. the shadow of fear. What appears as emotional security is frequently a persona concealing the shadow of fear. In the Jungian view, the persona is the social mask we wear to adapt to the outer world and maintain harmony in relationships. This mask often projects an image of emotional steadiness and self-assurance, especially in intimate bonds where one partner seems utterly secure and unaffected by the possibility of loss. They appear grounded, almost indifferent to threats, as though their inner world rests upon a solid foundation unaffected by the other's presence or absence. Yet this outward composure is rarely the full truth of the psyche. Beneath the polished surface lies the shadow, the repository of repressed emotions, vulnerabilities, and fears that the conscious ego refuses to acknowledge or integrate. The illusion of emotional security serves a vital defensive purpose. By presenting as unshakable, the individual avoids the discomfort of confronting deep-seated abandonment anxiety or the terror of emptiness that would surface without the stabilizing presence of the partner. The relationship becomes a container for these unclaimed shadow elements. The partner unconsciously carries the projection of strength or completeness, allowing the persona to remain intact. This creates a false sense of wholeness. The person does not consciously feel fear because the fear has been externalized and hidden behind the mask of calm reliability. They move through the connection with apparent confidence precisely because the shadow remains safely buried and unexamined. True security, by contrast, would require the courageous descent into the shadow realm to reclaim and integrate these disowned fears. Until that inner work occurs, the apparent emotional security stays fragile, dependent on the continuation of the external arrangement. Any genuine shift in the dynamic threatens to expose what has been concealed, revealing that the strength was never truly internal, but borrowed from the stability of the bond itself. This concealment explains why the mask of security can shatter so dramatically when the unconscious can no longer sustain the projection. The confrontation with the unlived psyche, true loss is not the departure of the other, but the confrontation with one's own unlived psyche. From the Jungian perspective, what we commonly call heartbreak or grief over losing a person is often a misdirection of psychic energy. The real wound does not stem from their physical or emotional absence, but from the sudden exposure to the vast territory within ourselves that remained unlived, unexplored, and unintegrated. When the other person leaves, they take with them the projections we had placed upon them, qualities, potentials, and fragments of our own soul that we had outsourced for safekeeping. Their departure strips away the external scaffolding, forcing the ego to stand naked before the self. The unlived psyche contains all the possibilities we postponed, the creativity we never pursued, the independence we never claimed, the emotions we never dared to feel, and the wholeness we secretly longed for, but avoided through the relationship. What feels like missing them is, in truth, the painful awakening to our own inner poverty, the realization that a significant portion of our life force had been invested outside rather than cultivated within. This confrontation with the unlived generates a profound emptiness far deeper than ordinary loneliness, because it touches the archetype of the self and reveals how much of our destiny we have betrayed through dependency. In this sense, the other's leaving becomes a merciless but necessary mirror. It does not merely remove a companion, it returns us to the unfinished task of individuation. The pain we experience is the psyche's urgent demand that we finally inhabit our own life instead of living it vicariously through another. Those who mistake the loss for mere relational failure miss its deeper purpose, the call to reclaim the soul pieces left behind and to begin the difficult but liberating work of becoming whole. When projections fail, the moment of awakening occurs when projection fails and the self demands integration. In the Jungian framework, projection is the unconscious mechanism by which we cast parts of our own psyche onto another person, experiencing them as external qualities rather than internal potentials. For a time, this works seamlessly. The partner becomes the carrier of our unlived gold, the missing courage, tenderness, wisdom, or vitality, allowing the ego to feel temporarily complete without the labor of inner development. The relationship appears stable precisely because these projections sustain the illusion of wholeness. Yet projections are inherently unstable. They depend on the other person remaining fixed in the assigned role. When the partner begins to change, withdraws, or simply refuses to carry the burden any longer, the projection fails. The energy that was flowing outwards suddenly rebounds. At this precise threshold, the ego experiences a disturbing void. What it once saw so clearly in the other now reveals itself as an inner reality demanding attention. This failure is not mere disappointment, it is a critical psychic event. The unconscious has withdrawn its consent from the old arrangement. It is here that the self, the central archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of the psyche, makes its authoritative demand. No longer willing to tolerate further postponement, the self generates powerful inner pressure in the form of anxiety, dreams, restlessness, or sudden emotional floods. This pressure is the awakening. The individual is compelled to confront what they have avoided, the task of integrating those projected contents back into conscious awareness. The moment is both terrifying and sacred, for it marks the shift from living through another to the arduous path of individuation. What feels like crisis is in reality the psyche's intelligent insistence on genuine growth. The old equilibrium collapses so that a deeper, more authentic order can emerge. The archetype of abandonment growth in one party activates the archetype of abandonment in the other. When one individual begins the authentic process of individuation, expanding their consciousness, reclaiming personal power, setting boundaries, or pursuing their own path, the unconscious equilibrium of the relationship is disturbed. What looks like positive development to the growing partner registers as a profound threat to the other. The archetype of abandonment, An ancient and universal pattern buried in the collective unconscious awakens with unexpected intensity. This is not ordinary insecurity or fear of change. It is a primordial response rooted in the earliest human experiences of separation, rejection, and existential aloneness. The growing partner's increasing autonomy withdraws the psychic energy that once sustained the other's compensatory fantasies. Previously, the relationship may have functioned as a silent agreement. One provides stability or emotional anchoring while the other remains comfortably dependent. As soon as the first begins to stand more firmly in their own being, the second experiences this movement as abandonment. Even if no actual leaving has occurred, the archetype floods the psyche with powerful emotions, panic, rage, clinging, or sudden coldness. These reactions feel disproportionate because they draw power from far deeper layers than personal history alone. The other is no longer merely reacting to the present situation, but reliving the ancient wound of being cast out from the source of wholeness. This activation reveals how deeply intertwined the two psyches had become through mutual projection. One's growth forces the other to face the very dependency they had denied. The archetype serves as a ruthless but purposeful messenger, compelling the psyche to confront what has been avoided. Until both parties recognize this dynamic, the relationship remains trapped in unconscious patterns. Genuine evolution in one inevitably disturbs the other, offering both a rare opportunity: either descend into the shadow and integrate the fear, or repeat the cycle of projection with someone new. Individuation and the status quo, the fear of loss remains dormant until the soul's journey toward individuation threatens the status quo. In the depths of the psyche, the fear of losing another person often lies sleeping, carefully guarded by layers of unconscious defense. As long as both individuals remain within the established relational pattern, fulfilling familiar roles, exchanging projections, and maintaining a comfortable equilibrium, the fear stays latent, rarely disturbing the surface of consciousness. The ego experiences the relationship as stable and reliable, interpreting this quietude as genuine confidence or emotional maturity. Yet this dormancy is conditional. It depends entirely upon the status quo remaining unchallenged. The moment one's soul begins its authentic journey toward individuation, everything shifts. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming oneself, of differentiating from collective norms and unconscious identifications, and of integrating previously split off aspects of the personality. As soon as this inner movement gains momentum through greater self-awareness, boundary setting, the pursuit of personal meaning, or the withdrawal of projections, the established order of the relationship is threatened. What was once a predictable exchange of psychic energy now becomes unstable. The partner who had relied on the old arrangement suddenly feels the ground moving beneath them. The dormant fear awakens not because of any overt rejection, but because the other's growth endangers the unconscious contract that kept both egos intact. This fear carries archetypal weight. It touches the primal terror of separation from the source of wholeness, echoing ancient motifs of exile and disintegration. Until the journey toward individuation begins in earnest, the psyche can safely postpone this confrontation. The status quo acts as a sedative, but once the soul stirs toward greater autonomy and inner authority, the fear rises with compensatory force, demanding attention. What appeared as emotional detachment or security now reveals itself as a fragile truce with the unconscious, one that can no longer hold when the deeper call of the self is answered. Synchronicity as the catalyst. Synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence, often serves as the catalyst that shatters complacency. In Jung's psychology, synchronicity describes those causal, meaningful events where an inner psychic state corresponds with an outer occurrence in a way that defies mere chance. These moments carry numinous energy precisely because they bridge the personal psyche and the larger order of reality. In the context of a relationship marked by unconscious dependency disguised as indifference, synchronicity frequently appears as the disruptive force that breaks the long, standing illusion of security. While one partner remains comfortably identified with the persona of non-attachment, the unconscious is already stirring. The growing tension between the ego's complacency and the self's demand for wholeness builds pressure within the psyche. At the precise moment when this inner conflict reaches a critical threshold, a synchronistic event erupts into conscious awareness, an unexpected message, a chance encounter, a dream that bleeds into waking life, a sudden opportunity that pulls the other person forward, or an external circumstance that forces separation. The event itself may appear ordinary to outsiders, yet to the individuals involved, it carries profound symbolic weight, illuminating the hidden truth of the relational dynamic. This meaningful coincidence acts as a messenger from the self. It bypasses the ego's carefully maintained defenses and delivers its revelation with unmistakable clarity. The person who once moved through the connection without apparent fear suddenly confronts undeniable evidence that the status quo is ending. Complacency dissolves because the synchronistic event cannot be rationally dismissed or controlled. It reveals that the projections are failing and the unconscious contract is breaking. What was comfortably postponed now demands immediate attention. The psyche uses synchronicity as an intelligent intervention, orchestrating outer events to align with inner necessity, compelling the individual to face the shadow, the fear of loss, and the urgent call toward individuation. Through this causal bridge, the deeper intelligence of the unconscious declares that the time for avoidance has ended. The path to conscious union, lasting connection, requires both parties to integrate their shadows rather than project them outward. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents all that we have repressed, denied, or disowned within ourselves, the unacceptable emotions, weaknesses, instincts, and potentials that the conscious ego finds threatening. Most relationships unconsciously function as a mutual projection field where each partner carries the other's shadow material. One becomes the container for the other's anger, vulnerability, dependency, or unlived darkness. This creates a powerful but unstable bond, intense attraction followed by inevitable friction, because neither is truly relating to the real person, but to their own unconscious contents mirrored back at them. When both individuals commit to the difficult work of shadow integration, the dynamic transforms fundamentally. Instead of exporting their inner darkness onto the partner through blame, idealization, or resentment, each begins the courageous process of owning and assimilating these split-off aspects. This requires honest self-confrontation, tolerance of anxiety, and the humility to withdraw projections. As the shadow is gradually integrated, the psychic energy previously wasted in projection returns to its rightful owner. The relationship ceases to be a battlefield of unconscious contents and becomes a meeting ground between two more whole individuals. Such a connection is no longer based on need, compensation, or mutual completion, but on conscious choice and mutual respect for the other's autonomy. Love then flows not from deficiency, but from overflow. Conflicts still arise, yet they serve the process of further individuation rather than destruction. The relationship gains depth, resilience, and authenticity precisely because it is no longer burdened by the weight of unintegrated shadow material. This is the rare foundation for a lasting union, one capable of withstanding change, growth, and the inevitable storms of life, because both souls stand increasingly rooted in their own inner truth. The one who does not fear losing you remains asleep in the safety of illusion until the unconscious demands its reckoning. What appeared as strength was often persona. What felt like security was shadow concealed. What seemed like love was frequently projection. The moment you begin your own journey toward wholeness, the ancient archetypes awaken abandonment, the unlived self, and the call to individuation. True loss was never the departure of the other, it was the confrontation with your own unlived life. True awakening arrives when projections fail and the self insists on being born. Synchronicity then becomes the turning point. Growth in one stirs the dormant fear in the other. the comfortable bond cracks, and what was hidden is finally revealed. Yet this crisis is not tragedy, it is initiation. Lasting connection can only be built when both souls cease outsourcing their shadows and begin the sacred labor of integration. When each reclaims their own gold and darkness, the relationship transforms from unconscious dependency into conscious union. Two sovereign individuals choosing one another not from need, but from fullness. Turn inward, honor the call of the self, withdraw your projections, integrate your shadow. Only then can love move beyond fear of loss into something eternal, a meeting of whole beings rooted in truth, free from illusion. The psyche is wise, it will not let you settle for less. Walk the path of individuation.